And Geoff Mosher is in the house today for today's edition of Football at Fours. We got plenty to build off from Tuesday's conversation, free agency less than a month away, and all the rumors that are out there. We discussed yesterday this cesspool of rumors. Where do they keep coming from? But we had a lot that we left on the table, a lot of meat on the bone from yesterday's conversation with Geoff Mosher, so we'll bring him back in for another edition of Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash. What's up, Geoff?
Mike, long time no talk. How are you?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I was awoken today. I was already awakened, but I had a message on my phone from the Birds 365 guys to come talk Eagles with them. So I was all juiced up talking Eagles today. So I've already had a dose of Eagles talk this morning that they were throwing a bunch of stuff my way. A lot of it had to do with Russell Wilson and, where I feel about that. But we went down the road of Howie Roseman, right? Roseman kind of finds his way this time of the year. And we talked a lot about what the Eagles could do. I guess one of the questions I wanted to get to yesterday when it comes to Roseman is, do we think Roseman should be in the market of adding like veteran free agents? Like, is that a task that he should be looking at, a method of building this team? Should he be looking at adding a lot of free agents, typical to what he did? They went 7-9 the one year and brought in the Chris Longs, the LeGarrette Blunts. Should he follow that playbook?
Yeah, I think in general, the best teams who really go about assembling their rosters the right way. I mean, there's obviously, as we talked about yesterday, there's more than one way to skin a cat. But if you look at how some of the more consistent teams go about it, they use the draft to just stockpile as many good young players as possible. And they use free agency as a tool to fill holes. Now, where the Eagles have had trouble in the past, going way back before even Chip Kelly, was using free agency as a way to fill long-term holes and trying to get the big star, splash signing, whether it's Namdi or whoever, Stacey Andrews, things like that. And that's not necessarily the best way to go about it, as many of other teams have shown. The best way to use free agency is to fill your holes with veterans who are going to give you 1 or 2 years. They're not going to cost a lot of money. They're going to play specific roles, and they're going to be the type of player that, if you do draft somebody, a first-round pick, second-round pick, and that player is really good and has a chance to start over the veteran, then you can do that because you're not in bed long-term with millions of dollars to a free agent who you just then find out is not as good as the guy you drafted in the second round. So if you went and talked about the 2017 team, right? Chris Long was a guy who they also drafted Derek Barnett, and they wound up both being backups who would come in pass rush situations. The slot cornerback Patrick Robinson played a huge role on a 1-year deal, and then parlayed that into a big deal with New Orleans next year. But he was very, very vital in his 1 year. They signed Steph Wisniewski on a 1-year deal. He wound up getting in there and plugging left guard when things weren't going well for Isaac Seumalo. And those guys, I'm sure there were a couple of other, 1-year veterans that probably not coming to my head at that time, but they even tried to do that going forward. Haloti Ngata, Mike Wallace. Some of them did not work out. Some of them got hurt. But that's the right idea, is to fill your immediate holes, which we look at the Eagles right now. We see holes at corner. We see holes at safety, hole at linebacker, potentially on the D-line, maybe even wide receiver. And you say, these are areas where they can really have 1-year help, but then if they wind up drafting guys who are going to be really good players, they can slide into those roles as well.
Do you look at Moshe free agent target in terms of position as opposed to draft? Like, in other words, I'd rather build in free agency. I'd rather get this position in free agency than draft a guy because I can get it, have an established guy, know what I'm getting, cheaper.
Well, me personally, no, but I know that the Eagles do that. And I'm not saying I'm right, they're wrong, whatever. Clearly, safety is a position that they've done well with in free agents over the last 10 years, going back to Malcolm and then Rodney, and then even Anthony Harris last year, who was not great, but he certainly filled the hole that they needed. He didn't lose you games by any stretch of the means. So that's a position that the Eagles know that they don't typically use first and second round draft picks on. And that it's a position that the way it's been in their defense, it's not like they've prioritized having one of these versatile safeties who can do everything. Although I would say they found out that Malcolm could be that guy
Right.
that by the third year of his career. So that's a position. Same with linebacker. You know that they're not very unlikely to use a first round pick on a linebacker, but they did a nice job getting Nigel Bradham in free agency 1 year from Buffalo there. And so that's another position that they'll probably look at. And they've supplemented their defensive line. We mentioned Chris Long and Michael Bennett, which was technically a trade, but it was kind of like bringing in a 1 year free agent, and Haloti Ngata and some other guys, Ryan Kerrigan. So yeah, I do think they have specific positions in mind that they're more comfortable filling in free agency than using high draft picks on. Not to say that they'll never again, not to say they'll never draft a safety in the first round, or they'll never ever again draft linebacker in the first round, but the regime has its priorities.
Okay, for instance, like running back, that's a draft spot. That's not a free agent addition. Now, they did get LeGarrette Blount. They did bring in Jordan Howard, who they were familiar with. Boston Scott was an undrafted guy, but you would think like, hey, I can get a guy in the 4th or 5th round. They did that last year with Kenny Gainwell.
Yeah, it seems with them starting running back is a draft spot, but the veteran backup is a free agent deal for them, which is probably par for the course for a lot of NFL teams.
You think that wide receiver, they've drafted 3 years, really. I mean, they had a second-round pick, J.J., Rager, and then last year. Is this the time you say, we're going to go free agent? So if you're going to make your big free agent splash, is that the position that you feel comfortable doing it, especially in this particular free agent class?
Well, I don't suspect that they're going to break the bank at that position, because again, we're talking about what they normally do with big money. That's normally something they're going to pour into the defensive line when they got Javon Hargrave. Cornerback. Remember, we never seem to talk about this. I think it's a fascinating what if. But what if Byron Jones had accepted the huge deal that the Eagles offered to him instead of the huge deal that the Dolphins offered to him, and then there would be no Darius Slay, and Byron Jones is a nice player, but he's not Darius Slay. So what would have ever happened if he chose Philadelphia? We will never know.
And that's the guy they wanted.
That's a position they'll throw a lot of money at. When they wanted to upgrade wide receiver in 2017 with a big name in Alshon Jeffrey, they brought him in on a 1 year deal that was highly incentivized before they finally gave him the money after he had a nice year. So this will be a test. If Howie were to go out there and throw money at Mike Williams or Chris Godwin, or let's say Devontae Adams became available, which I doubt he will, if somebody like that would be kind of a first for him in quite a while. And it would be against what he has done since coming back from that 1 year that he didn't have power. So I'm more prone to think that at wide receiver, he's going to look for a good player who's somewhat of a bargain for whatever reason. Maybe like Juju Smith-Schuster coming off an injury, or even DJ Chark coming off an injury. But does he give somebody like a 3 year, $35-40 million contract out of position? It would surprise me right now as we sit here today.
Yeah, all right, you mentioned DJ Chark. Allen Robinson, he's another one. I mean, he's been a very good player. I mean, I'm really intrigued to see if he overpays to make sure he gets a veteran and gets one in here. Like, does he feel like, hey, if we just get that veteran piece, that completes our offense? We have a good offensive line. We've got the running back. We've got a tight end. We've got a good receiver we like on one side. We like Quez Watkins. We just need that final piece. I'm willing to spend a little more.
Well, I love how you asked that question, because it really is a philosophical question, not even just a personnel question. This is something that in our show that dropped this morning with Greg Cosell, in the Intel with Greg Cosell, which dropped on our podcast platform this morning, we talked about free agent wide receivers and linebackers. And we asked Greg about specific guys like Allen Robinson, Mike Williams.
And did Mike Williams have any crossover with Sirianni?
With Steichen. Not Sirianni. I think he had it with Steichen.
Okay.
But the biggest question is that we don't really know is kind of a behind the closed door thing. What do the Eagles see themselves as in 2022 as an offense? Do they see themselves as and they've said they're going forward, Jalen Hurts. So do they see themselves as continuing to use the Yeah, until they don't, right? As using the run as the backbone of what they do, or would they like to open up the pass game a little more? And if so, do they feel that Jalen Hurts needs a weapon like Allen Robinson to help his development, or do they feel like giving a lot of money to a wide receiver who right now at his stage of development, Jalen Hurts is probably not going to target that much because he's Devontae Smith and your tight end, Dallas Goedert, and you're going to run a lot? Does it make sense to pour a ton of money into a guy who may not see a lot of targets?
Well, that's. I'm glad you walked me into a question, which is, do they want to open the offense up more next year?
I would think so. We all decided in doing the show with Greg that we would think that they would want to open up the offense more last year. So now you ask yourself, okay, we want to open up the offense more. Do we want to still pour a lot of money into wide receiver when we do have a good running game and we do have Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert taking up a lot of snaps? Would we get just as much or equal production from Smith-Schuster, Chark, Byron Pringle as we would get from Allen Robinson, who's on the downside of his career, knowing those three are going to cost us a lot less money and a lot less years probably than Robinson or maybe even Chark, who might still, because he's young, get a multi-year deal? That's what free agency is, the big puzzle, and that's the kind of question that the team, I think, has to figure out. And if you're asking me based on their history, what I think that they're going to say, we don't really need to spend. We need a wide receiver, but we don't need to have Allen Robinson there. We've got Devontae, we've got Dallas Goedert. We are trying to work with Jalen Reagor, but we do need a veteran who can come in and play snaps, make some catches, but he doesn't have to be a superstar.
Would you be in play? Let's say I gave you a blank check, and I'm going to take Devontae Adams out of it, all right? But I gave you a blank check and said you can get a wide receiver. Are you interested in Godwin?
Oh, well, yeah, of course. I mean, why not?
He's coming off an injury. He's coming off a pretty major. Yeah. He's coming off a big injury, that's all.
I mean, it's an ACL, and these days, my God, I mean, I know it's a different injury, but Cam Akers came back from an Achilles in the same season. That's unbelievable. It seems like players are coming back from knee and Achilles injuries a lot faster now. And I agree, it's still an 8-month injury. So let's say it's Michael Gallup or the guy you mentioned, Chris Godwin. Mm-hmm. You're probably not getting the best version of that guy in August and September. But if you're thinking about playoff football and by the time November and December rolls around, those guys should be pretty darn good and almost 100% to what they were.
Yeah, Godwin, it would be an intriguing one, obviously. Allen Robinson, I think, is an intriguing guy. Devontae Adams, I'm even taking him out of the mix here. We talked about Juju last week when you were on. I guess Mike Williams would be the other high-level guy.
Yeah.
If now I'm looking at Spot Track at what his market value would be, and they're saying 4 years, $66 million. I think that's probably something that Howie's not going to be writing a check for. You?
No, and then that's part of the weird deal of free agency, because if you look at Mike Williams' career, it's been pretty good. It got off to a slow start, but I think he's got two 1,000-yard seasons. So Juju Smith-Schuster has a 1,400-yard season. So he only has 1,000 yards, but it's better than anything Mike Williams did.
Yeah, he had that monster 1,500-yard year, and then he was hurt all last year. I mean, he just fell off the map after that thing.
Right. I think the best thing you can do in free agency is match the contract to the value to the player, obviously. So Greg Cosell in our show said, you know what? Byron Pringle is a really good wide receiver. And it's not just because when he says really good, he means he's not a household name, but he does what he's supposed to do. He stacks cornerbacks. He gets the job done. He's obviously probably not going to have much of a role in Kansas City's offense as long as Tyreek Hill is there, as long as Travis Kelce there, and as long as even McCole Hardman's there. So maybe there's an opportunity for Byron to go somewhere else and show what he can do.
1 year, 3.2 is market value for him.
Yeah, and that might be the perfect kind of signing for a team like the Eagles that's just looking for a guy who can come in and make plays.
Okay, so what are they looking for? Slot guy, outside guy. What do they want to do? What do they want to do with Watkins?
Great question. So the question again is exactly what you just said. What do you want to do with Devontae Smith and Watkins? Devontae, as Greg Cosell pointed out, had a good year, but is probably best used in the NFL as a Z receiver who you can move around. You can put, because that's the type of skill set that he has. He can line up in multiple spots. He can hurt you. Normally, your X spot lines up, on the only side where there's no other wide receivers, and the route tree is a little bit limited there. It's usually slant, deep dig, post, something like that, in a West Coast offense. Not that it's an unimportant slot, but you have a player who's just better used moving around and avoiding press coverage. So if you're going to move Devontae Smith to the Z, you need a natural X, right? So that's sort of what the Eagles should be looking for. Somebody who can line up at the X, and that's usually someone with a little bit of size, a little physicality. They can beat press coverage, and they can excel in those three routes that I mentioned. Now, Allen Robinson is actually kind of like an ideal X. And Juju, Greg pointed out, has played slot for the Steelers, but was a good X at USC and won from that spot a lot. So they'll have to look at this group of receivers and decide, A, what they want out of Devontae Smith and Quez, where they want to line them up predominantly. And then after you figure that out, then you figure out, well, what's the position that's open the most? That's what we should target in free agency.
Right, because if you like Watkins on the outside and say, we're fine with him there, then do you shift your attention to a guy like Jamison Crowder, who's more of a slot guy,
right?
And say, hey, although his market value 4 years, $49 million, $12 million a year, I think
he's
that's
going to catch 12 balls a game for 78 yards again. It's amazing how he's like a fantasy PPR machine.
It's crazy when you look at. Let me see what the market value is for Allen Robinson. If Godwin was what that $16 million or 4 years, $65 million for Allen Robinson. You all right with that?
I'm not sure I agree with that. I don't. I know there's teams with a lot of money to spend, but he's coming off not a great year. He's going to be 30, or he is 30. He's also a guy who is not a burner. He kind of has more short area quickness than long quickness, and he's been used in the slot a lot. Not that he can't play the X, but the ideal X here is Mike Williams, but he's going to get probably a tremendous contract. That's probably going to be too much for what he's produced so far in the NFL.
I would think so, right? And then, I mean, I guess you go like Christian Kirk is interesting. You like him at all?
He's short, right? I mean, he's kind of a short vertical slot receiver.
Well, I guess it goes back to the conversation of what do you think they think about Watkins?
I feel like the Eagles just need a physical, bigger body type of guy to complement all the speed and twitchiness they have with Devontae, with Quez, and Jalen Reagor hasn't showed it, but he is twitchy. I guarantee you people in the NFL thought he was twitchy coming out of TCU because he was a punt returner and an explosive wide receiver. So I do think that they do need more of a physical, bigger body presence, a kind of a contested catch guy.
You say contested catch guy. That would be, I was going to say, who might look good in the slot would be a guy like Aguilar.
I don't think they're going to walk down that road again.
No, but I mean, like if you like Watkins on the outside with his speed, where Aguilar really excelled was as the slot guy.
Well, I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that maybe that's where you're going to awaken Jalen Reagor potentially. If you're going to play Devontae at the X and you're going to play Watkins at the Z, and you're only going to make a moderate addition in free agency at wide receiver, then you might want to put Jalen Reagor in the slot and see if that has the same impact that it did for Nelson when he was here in 2017 and 18 when he caught a lot more balls.
Hey, real quick, good conversation on the wideouts. There's a lot more too that we could potentially get into, but I want to flip over to they got Goddard. What is that position going to look like behind him?
Yeah, it's a great question. Unfortunately, the Tyree Jackson injury. I mean, he's had the knee injury. It's probably going to miss all of OTAs, probably the first start of camp, and you just don't know. Right now, it's Dallas Goedert and Jack Stoll. They did bring back Richard Rodgers, so they added a year to his deal, so he's back as well. But it would not surprise me at all if this is a position that they look to address in the draft. I don't know that they feel like they need a free agent signing because with Rodgers and Stoll, they've got a number 2 and a number 3. But no, Rodgers is not a long-term solution, and Stoll really is. He's a nice player, undrafted free agent, can block a little bit, which is important. But I don't know if they view him as more than a 3. So I think they would like to find a 2, in case Goddard either. Go ahead.
Do they want that 2 to be a pass catcher first or a blocker first?
Well, I would imagine, you want your 2 to be able to fill in for your 1. And Goddard is a good blocker, but what he really is good at is obviously being one of two weapons that Jalen Hurts likes to throw to. So I would imagine they'll sacrifice a little on the blocking end if they can get a really good, cat pass catching tight end.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think of you mentioned Jackson. He got hurt, and he would be more of a pass catcher.
He would be more of a pass. Although they were pleasantly surprised with his blocking acumen for a guy who had never played the position before and was a quarterback convert. Right. Yeah, he was adequate at it with the opportunity to get better, but it's not like that was his thing.
Have they ever looked at Whiteside in there?
J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is
He's a great blocker, apparently.
Well, I mean, they've already kind of converted him into a run-blocking slot wide receiver, which you could argue is what a flex tight end is.
Right.
So, I mean, they've kind of already – he's never going to line up in line, right? So he would be a tight end who's flexed but blocks a lot too. So that's what he does.
Now, do you think he makes the team this year? He's a good blocker.
I think it's going to be a real long uphill climb.
All right, yeah. I mean,
you never know. 5 guys could get hurt, and he's standing there hey, I'm a good blocker.
This would be his 4th year.
This would be his 4th year.
So I guess they can finally cut bait.
They can cut bait, and I'm going to guess that they will.
All right. Football at 4 in the book. That was fast. I mean, my gosh, that was the fastest.
Really? That is fast. Holy cow.
We just had a good conversation. See?
Yeah, we did.
Man. March 16th.
I'm going to be back on, Monday? So
I don't know. You're making the schedule now, dude.
Yeah, I am making the schedule. So here's the thing, because I'm going to the Combine Monday, and I'm leaving at 8 o'clock. I think we can get the 4 o'clock interview in.
So the Combine thing has been averted, right?
The crisis has been averted. Shockingly, the NFL decided that they really, really, really need these players on TV to, have content and make money. So they decided, sure, whatever you guys want.
I was going to say, that is an interesting conversation. Like, the players, did they benefit from this? Is it hurting them more than it's helping them? Are you at the point where it's like these guys do their pro days now? Do I even need this? Helps the lower guys more than it does the guys.
100%. 100%. And honestly, most NFL teams would probably be fine teams if there were none of these workouts, if they just got the interviews and the medicals. That's what they care about most. The NFL wants the workouts because that's what 15 million people are watching for some crazy reason from Monday through Friday. And if you notice, the NFL's already started to safeguard itself in case there is a day where there's no combine, because now all those pro days, the Alabama one, the LSU one, the USC one, they got Daniel Jeremiah there. They got cameras. They make those made-for-TV events too. So those are going to take the place of the combine as far as TV exposure and, marketing and things like that if the combine ever disappears.
Well, real quick, ESPN.com did one player from each team that needs a change of scenery. Philadelphia's was obvious. It was Rieger. And Chicago's was Allen Robinson. So maybe that you could just say, hey, Rieger, we'll let you go to Chicago. We'll sign Robinson, and there's a nice swap right there. I know one's a free agent and one's would need to be cut, traded, whatever, but it seems like it's a good fit to get those two to get.
Well, they get the old NBA sign and trade in. How about that?
There you go. All right, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live. Make sure you check out the Inside the Birds podcast wherever you download and listen to your podcast, and check out InsideTheBirds.com for all the off-season news and information. All right, Moshe, I will talk to you on Monday.
All right, man. Have a good one.
And he will be at the Combine, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN.